Hello, how you doing? Um, Evolution has a problem. Okay, when you go to talk about evolution, it actually has two different meanings. Um, Using the same word evolution. Now, when you use a word, you have to know what you're talking about, and when you talk about evolution, there's a commonly used tactic called bait and switch from the evolutionists that believe in evolution. So what they'll use one definition of the word evolution and say, see, there's evolution, and apply it to the other term of evolution, which there is no evidence of evolution. This is the reason why I don't call evolution microevolution, because it's not evolution, not in the sense of the word of bacteria to a bonobo or whatever. So when you're talking about evolution or deep time evolution over long periods of time, as is the case in what a lot of people believe in, which I don't. You're talking about um, going through different stages of drastic changes, which require drastically different written instructions. So you're not altering instruction that's already there, supposedly in evolution. If you believe in evolution, you're writing vast amounts of instruction that's not there, that never was there in the genome, which is not possible. You cannot get any written instruction that's not there. If you want to, let's say this is the mechanism by which they believe that evolution happens. They believe that there's a line of information in the genome. It's copied twice instead of once. One of the lines of the information is used as is normally used, and the other one is altered for a different purpose, for a different use. Okay, this has never been proved or observed, but this is what they believe. They believe this alternate, because there's many multiple copies of information that's in the genome. So they're saying that these alternate copies of the same information are going to end up being altered so much so that it becomes another use or another, evolutionary step, suppose. That's what they believe. So you would have to get multiple mistakes, copying errors, to be compatible with other copying errors and to be compatible with the information that's already there. So they say that's not a problem because whatever doesn't work is going to be weeded out, it won't survive, won't live, which is not always the case. A lot of our genome is copying errors that we are surviving with. So would they believe that you're going to be writing an instruction that's not there? Okay, so here's the problem. The problem is that you can't get a single beneficiary change that's complementary to the genome and to, say, other errors that are made. Okay, now they claim they do have beneficial changes like sickle cell anemia, where you can cancel that because it's not a beneficial change. they say, well, it's whatever happens to survive. That's what evolution is about. Okay, so you're going to try to make copying errors, even though it's destructive and harmful to the organism. That just because it survives, it's going to be beneficial, which hasn't been observed yet, but that is the belief. So you're going to have multiple copying errors that are complementary to each other. And the chances of a single copying error being beneficial, we can already observe that it's almost virtually non-existent. Okay, suppose there's a chance that one is beneficial, and they could name off, whatever they think is beneficial. Okay, now you have to have two copying errors that are complementary to each other and the rest of the genome. Now, what's the chances of that? What's the chances of three copying errors being beneficial to the other errors and beneficial to the genome that's already there? Now you can see how impossible this is getting. Okay, so the belief is that these are being selected for. Whatever works, whatever doesn't work, doesn't work. So then you have to get four copying errors that are beneficial to the previous three copying errors and to the rest of the genome. Now you can see how ridiculous this is going to be. Because the more copying errors that you get that have to be beneficial, have to be compatible with the rest of all of the other errors and the genome as it was. Because whenever you change something like an immune system or whatever, or if you change a protein, or if you change anything in the genome, it has to be compatible with the immune system and the rest of the entire organism. So these two meanings of the word definition are not even close to being the same thing. They shouldn't even be together as the same word. You can't use one word describing two very different things and claiming it's the same thing when it's not the same thing. There's variation, there's adaptation, there's response to the environment. This is all from the existing instruction that's already in the genome. Nothing is altered, nothing is changed except for the expression of the genome, which is epigenetics and the response to the environment. Nothing without changing without any mistakes whatsoever. You can have a response to the environment. You can have different size beaks. You can have different amount of hair or different length of hair. You can have all these factors, different colorations, from the information that's already there without changing the thing, without any mistake, without any copy and error. This is all accomplished by the genome itself. So you cannot call it evolution. You cannot call responding to the environment, variation of species, evolution, because it's not evolution. Because you can have all of that happening without a single copy and error. So when you use that as a bait and switch tactic, trying to say that microevolution will lead to macroevolution over time, that is just not the case. It's not true at all, because the macroevolution is clearly, if it existed, is resulting in vast amounts of written instruction that was never there before. I mean, specific instruction. Formation of a feather, which is not a small feat. It's not, you're just not going to have that from copying errors, the formation of a feather. And all the different changes between the different organisms, such as change between a worm and a fish or whatever, or a change between a fish and amphibian, or a change between amphibian and a reptile. These are all huge changes with vast amounts of written instruction that is entirely unrelated to the previous organism, or it's not found in the previous organism. If you just think about it, of course, you're changing from a wiggle thing that swims to a fish. You have to have scales. You have to have a whole range of things. You have fins, eyes, everything, that a fish has. And then from a fish to amphibian, you gotta lose the scales, and you gotta grow limbs, and you gotta be able to learn how to breathe, and you gotta be slimy. Which there's slimy fish too, so that supposedly would not be a problem. But then from an amphibian to a reptile, then you gotta lose the sliminess. You gotta grow scales, which aren't the same kind of scales. It's the same keratin, perhaps, but it's not the same kind of scales. It's a reptile scale. It's a whole range of different things that you have to have that's different, with a different set of rules, different instructions in the genome to make all those different things. And remember, you can't even get a single complementary change that's compatible with the rest of the genome, much less 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and certainly not billions of bits of data that are all complementary to the rest of the entire genome. I mean, you can claim it happens, but you cannot observe it happening. So you really can't claim it happens if you want to be an intellectual, or if you want to be honest, or if you want to be a scientist. If you want to be a scientist, you can't claim evolution, because there is no mechanism being observed that writes instruction that's not there. And again, saying that a variation or adaptation or response to the environment is evolution is not evolution. It's not the same thing. So you can't use the same word for two different things that are entirely different. Adaptation, response to the environment. Hello, Wildheart. Epigenetics is all from existing information. Microevolution, or evolution on a small scale. See, that's what I'm trying to explain, is that there is no such thing as small scale evolution. It's from existing information. It's defined as a change. The change is not a change in the genetic information. That's what I'm saying. Frequency of allele variants, alleles in a population over generations, but the information didn't change. So change in allele frequency or expressed information, it's not a change in the information. And why do, oh, no, don't appeal to what somebody says or thought or believed. That's just wrong. That's not science. And it's not 99.999 anyway. So what you have to do, you have to explain in your own words how you can get vast amounts of programming that's not there from copying errors, which is totally bankrupt, impossible, nonsense to believe such a thing. So that's why you have this double meaning of evolution that's got to stop. You're using two different meanings using the same word with two entirely different meanings that are totally unrelated. Just rounding up. Yeah. Yeah, I know. I know. That's what the rounding up. um, Never mind. So yeah, maybe you'll be lucky if 90% of the scientists believe in evolution. You'll be lucky because you remember you have to include doctors as scientists, and you know people in the scientific fields, in the genetic engineering, all that stuff. You know the cancer research, and you know for a fact that it's not 99%. It's probably more like 80 or 90% that believe in evolution, only because that's what they're told to begin with. And just because somebody believes something doesn't prove anything anyways. So we have to stop using this word evolution when you talk about microevolution, because it's not evolution. It's not the same thing. It's totally unrelated. This is where you have to define your terms and divide between talking about one thing and talking about another thing. And there's a huge gap in between the two. So long as we don't include dentists, it will be the dentists. Don't even go to there. Don't even talk about dentists. You know, I have such a low opinion of this dentist. It's unreal. But anyways, that's another thing. So, because I've been around for a while, and dentists are really slacking. That's a field that's really slacking. It's like evolutionary biology. It's non-functional. So how you doing, Wild Heart? How you doing? Yeah, this anyways, because people are not going to understand what the issue is if you're using the same word for two different things that are entirely unrelated different things. You can talk about epigenetics is not evolution. Response to the environment is not evolution. Um, Adaptation, change in allele frequency, that's not evolution. You say it's evolution. You say if you can do it enough, it's going to turn a dog into an orca. I mean, a seal, orca, or whatever. But it's not. It's not happening though, because the instruction is totally different. The instruction is not a copy from one thing to another. Most creationists with PhD tend to be dentists for some reason. Creationists with PhD. Well, yeah, like I said, I'm not a fan of dentists of any kind, and if they're creationists, well, we'll let that slide. But it's hard to find a dentist that won't destroy your teeth. They make it worse. I mean, it might help short term, but in the long run, it's going to destroy your teeth. Anyways, it's certainly not helping. When I'm sure if they wanted to, they could have come up with a remedy for cavities a long time ago. When you have, this is a rabbit trail, but when you have, I spent, many, many years as a kid in the Amazon jungle. I come to the United States, go to the dentist, have my teeth checked, and the big question is there any cavities? No, there's no cavities. And you get all excited. Oh, no cavities. That's great. All those years in the Amazon, not a single cavity when I come back, right? So then, 6 months or a year later, go back to the same dentist. Oh, you got 4 cavities. I said, what? It's not possible. So I tell my dad, this dentist is crazy. Let's take me to another dentist. He's uh he's out of his mind. So so I go to the other dentist, and the other dentist said, okay, I'll do 3. To this day, that one tooth that was never drilled is still never drilled. So I have no respect whatsoever for dentists. Okay, surely the scientists get to define what evolution. No, they do not. Not if it has 2 different meanings. And that was the one I gave. That's what you get for having jaguar teeth. Um, the you no matter who you are, you still can't use one word to describe 2 different things. You have to distinguish between the two, and it's got to be more than just micro and macro evolution, because micro evolution does not equate or become macro evolution, because you're not getting written instruction that's not there that's required for evolution. I wouldn't trust a dentist that worked for free. Well, to me, it's probably not that much different, believe it or not, because the one is going to learn from the other, just like one scientist learns from the other about evolution, you know, as to what the definition of evolution is. And when you have a single word to describe 2 very different things, which one will never turn into the other, it's a bait and switch tactic. It's deceptive. Because here you have supposed microevolution can happen with 0 mutations, 0 copying errors. And it's the copying errors that are supposed to equate to evolution. It's supposed to be the driving mechanism, quote unquote, mechanism for evolution. You have to have copying errors to write vast amounts of instruction which is not there, which is just, if you had half a mind, it's totally ludicrous. I mean, if you have an IQ of, say, 100 or so, you should know that that's just absurd, totally absurd, to think that unrelated mistakes, copying errors, are going to write encyclopedias of instruction that's not there. It's just totally absurd. And you cannot be teaching such an absurd thing to kids in a classroom who don't know about it, or even scientists in a college who don't know better themselves. And of course, these scientists don't know better because they can't explain what the mechanism is to actually write vast amounts of instruction that's not there. I have never seen a scientist, biologist, or anyone explain how you can get billions of bits of written instruction that's not there from unrelated mistakes, copying errors. It's not happening. Never did happening. It's only a grasping at straws because you don't want to believe that there's a creator when all the evidence is of a creator. All of the evidence is of a creator. From the written instruction to the working molecules that are programmable. And not only do the elements have to be programmable, they have to be programmed. And they are programmed with untold numbers of mechanisms making it all work, without which it wouldn't work. Like I was watching video from Bill Morgan. If a single mechanism in a dog or whatever it is doesn't work, the dog is dead. Everything all has to work in the cell, in each of the cells. And if the mechanism doesn't work, the animal dies. Every mutation brings about new combination of genes. Well, the truth is, I hate to, bring a newsflash, is that what makes us different is different numbers of copies of the same information. That's the only mutation there is different numbers of copies of the same information that we have. Like if you have a darker skin, you have more ways of producing melanin. And if you have less, you have less ability to make melanin. But it's still the same information. And there's variation within the genome that alters back and forth. Like it'll give you more height, more width, more strength, or less, and it alters. It goes back and forth. Even that's why kids are so different from the same two parents, and because there's a recombination of the given information that's already there, and it's not because of mutations that the kids look different. It's the shuffling of the genetic information in the genome that results in slightly different expressions, which you can see in the morphology of the organism. So it's not from genetic mistake. It's not from copying errors that you have variation. This is what I'm trying to explain, is that's why you can't call it evolution. It's because it's not from copying errors that you have variation, adaptation, response to the environment, epigenetic factors that pass from one generation to another. It's amazing how one life is affected will be passed on to the next generation. And it's a fact. And it's not because of copying errors. It's called epigenetics. It's called responding to the environment. And it happens from one generation to the next, not from copying errors. So you're going to have to get a different term for variation, response to the environment, and genetic drift, and different number of allele frequencies, because they are not copying errors. That's a response to the environment that is part of the design of the genome for it to work. And remember, if one single mechanism in the genetic information, or one defect, one copy and error, is going to result in all these diseases that we have, like sickle cell anemia and bone diseases and bone marrow disease, all this stuff, they're from copying errors in the genetic information. They're not a good thing. And evolutionists are relying on the hope, above all hopes, that all the bad mistakes are going to be weeded out, and only the beneficial, good mistakes are going to be utilized, writing billions of bits of written data. In other words, you have to have billions of copying errors that are being selected for, that are entirely viable and compatible with the rest of the genome and all of the other copying errors, which is just totally absurd It should have been removed from the classrooms long, long time ago because of how absurd it is. And if I can understand it, I can see that there is no mechanism for evolution. It has no place in the science classroom. And you have to remove it because it's not fact. You can only teach facts in a science classroom. You cannot teach lies. You cannot teach things that are unsubstantiated, that haven't been observed, that are just outright lies to children or to anyone. You just can't do it. It's immoral, unethical, and wrong. In case you didn't understand the other terms. I'm not talking about you. Not talking to any one person in particular, but I mean, just saying. Surely, every mutation brings about new combinations of genes. No. A mistake, a copy and error is just a copy and error results in not being functional, but it's a good thing that there's plenty more copies of the same information that are functional. Now, what you're going to have to do is show that these uh, these sections of information that are not functional are going to eventually have a function by way of other copy and errors, which has never been demonstrated or observed or in any way, detected. I mean, plus you're hoping beyond hope that there is such a thing as deep time for all this to happen and for nothing to generate during that time. And a simple observation refutes the deep time that we have, and that's the fact that even as low as 12 or 15 million years would have eroded all of the sediment layers into the ocean. I was always saying 50 million years, but it's actually less than that. Okay, they aren't only telling lies if they believe that it's true. Well, they believe it's true because they were told a lie. But just because they believe it doesn't mean it's true. And just because you believe something doesn't mean you can teach it, especially when you have no evidence of it existing or happening. Such as the case of evolution, it's not science. There is no observation of it happening, and it has no place in our vocabulary. Evolution doesn't exist. It shouldn't even be a word in the English language because it doesn't exist. It doesn't happen. Now, when you want to go and say there's microevolution, that's a bait and switch tactic using the definition of one thing and confusing it with the definition of another and equating the two when there's no equating them. You cannot equate response to the environment, adaptation, epigenetics, any of that to evolution because that all happens without any copy and errors. So you cannot equate that to evolution. There is no evolution. Evolution doesn't exist. So I'm trying to tell people there's no such thing as evolution, much less microevolution, because microevolution doesn't happen, can happen and does happen all the time without copy and errors. So there is no equating evolution to microevolution. It's not the same thing. It's a deceptive tactic to try to get you to believe that since a small change can happen, that great changes can happen. But a small change and a great change are not the same thing in genetics, because small changes happen all the time without any copying errors. In order for a great change to happen, to jump from one organism to another, you need vast amounts of different written instruction, which there is no way of acquiring from thin air. So there is no mechanism to jump from one organism to another, 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 when each imagined jump requires vast amounts of programming that's not there. It's not happening. Okay, they're not. Okay, as ever, you are right, JJ. I've got to go. Thanks for the chat later. Yeah, take it easy. Um, yeah, I would like for all these evolutionists, these scientists, to admit that what I'm saying is true and right, and that evolution doesn't exist in any way, shape, or form. It has no place in our vocabulary, much less a science class.